The Floor Academy podcast is sponsored by Trelama, the trade labor marketplace, where businesses can find skilled trade labor, such as flooring installers, and where flooring installers and other skilled tradespeople can find permanent or project work. You can set up your profile at trelama.com, TRALAMA.com, or download the app from the Apple App Store or Google Play. And remember, Trelama is always free for skilled tradespeople. Welcome to the Floor Academy podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Hedin, owner of Illustrious Hardwoods in Phoenix, Arizona. We are here to talk with flooring professionals from all across the country about the issues that matter to you. This week's guest is Shawn Dressler. Shawn owns and operates Flooring Inspirations in Janesville, Wisconsin. After getting a start at 18 in the union, he worked for a few different companies before moving off the floor and into commercial project management for a shop. When the shop went belly up, Flooring Inspirations was born. Shawn provides us with insights on what it will take to participate in the commercial flooring side of the trade and how we can get started. Shawn Dressler, are you on the line?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Welcome to the Floor Academy podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Good. You are an expert in the commercial flooring world, and that is a subject we haven't touched on yet. And I constantly see questions on the forums on Facebook of how do I get into commercial? How do I bid jobs? It's just it's a area that a lot of guys and gals are interested in and don't always know how to go about it. Personally, I'm residential remodel only, and I would have no idea where to begin. And it's something that I need answers to if I want to consider it in the future as the business grows. So let's have you introduce yourself, talk about who you are, how you got started, and where you're going within the industry.
Okay. So, after 20-some years of experience, the first thing about being an expert is just kind of sticking with what you know, keeping yourself out of trouble, being sure that you know all the details on what it is that you're working with, and stay away from the stuff, that's questionable or you don't quite understand it, or know the right places to get that information and be willing to do that homework. My start was 2 weeks out of high school when I was 18 years old. I pretty much joined the apprenticeship. The buddy's dad was worked for a company that had about 15 or 16 guys, and it was pretty much just, hey, come help us for the summer. And me and his son signed up, and 22 years later, here we are. So if you want to make it a life commitment, you just have to look at it, as a long-term picture. Now, I'm not going to tell you that at some point I wanted to get out of it, but you kind of weigh out the idea of starting all over again after having 10 years or 15 years into something. It's just as much work to start over again as it is just to figure out how to make your situation better, whether that's switch employers or maybe just, do work in a different manner, lower lifestyle expenses so you don't require to take some of those jobs that you normally are going to know you're going to have a rough day. We went through a 4-year apprenticeship. It was pretty much the first 3 years. It was a lot of tearing out, a lot of carrying stuff, and a lot of scraping and sweeping. I'll be honest, we didn't touch a piece of material for a couple of years because there was so many journeymen on projects that we couldn't clean the floor and glue the floor fast enough, that they were right behind you. So wow. It was a very well-oiled machine. I understood that, we had the mentality that unless there was glue being spread, the boss really wasn't making any money. Because once the glue is being spread, there's floor going down, and that was the name of the game. Because we were a labor-only subcontractor out of several stores in Madison. So that was kind of where I spent my first 3 years. my fourth year as an apprentice, I go back to wanting to better your situation a little bit. And as a third year working for the first guy I worked for, it was, scraping and sweeping floors was kind of not really what I thought the apprenticeship was going to be. I thought I was going to learn how to lay floors. So I took the opportunity to go and work for another company that was in town as a fourth year. And I was at that company, I was put with a journeyman, so it was apprentice journeyman kind of relationship. Mm-hmm. So the same guy that I worked with every day, I worked with him every single day. So it was easy for me to understand how he did stuff. It was easy for him to understand where my faults were, and I felt like it was a really good fit. Obviously maybe not, at the time, but looking back on everything now, it was a really nice fit. He's an expert flash cover heat welder. He went to Forbo training and was certified as a Forbo installer. So we did a children's hospital, where we had snowflakes and stars, all heat welded into linoleum. We were there for just him and I, like 4 months. Wow. And we pretty much worked at hospital. We worked at hospital for a couple of years. And just a fantastic experience, working with a guy, that is good at heat welding and flash coving. And the ultimate feather in the cap is when he walks into a room and says, I can't tell if I did this room or if you did this room. I mean, from my standpoint, that was like, I was like, just don't even have to say thank you. That was it. It was good. Mm-hmm. So, and so, we worked at that company for probably 2-3 years or so. And then, we were union and demographic, stuff changes. Some companies get bigger, some companies get smaller, and the guys just kind of tend to just kind of go where the work is. And so at that point, him and I, took an opportunity to go and work for, an up and coming shop, in Madison. And, they were a company that was actually out of Chicago that was doing the installation, arm basically for the store that we worked for. So, again, we were back into working for a shop that was labor only, which has its own challenges, from a resource standpoint. But other than that, it was good. I spent a couple years working for that operation, and then the economy got kind of slow. And at that point, there's a lot of union guys laid off, and mm-hmm. I kind of went off on my own in 2008. Give or take, somewhere right in there, 2010, just kind of doing odd jobs. I mean, at that point, the economy was so bad. It was, you're mowing lawns and shoveling snow, to do whatever you can to make $30, just to make it. So, we went through a year or two of that, some side jobs, some bathrooms, and, and at that point, the town that I live in, there was a school referendum, and the company that had that work, had asked me if I'd be willing to do some work for them, because they were falling behind on the projects. And I went and did some work for them, and the guy offered me a job as a project manager at the end of the summer. And, that was pretty much my transition from, being on my knees to, my first experience mm-hmm. in an office. And that was that would have been in like 2014, 2015, give or take. So I spent 4 years with them. It was interesting to see how the inside of a company worked, as far as when an owner or somebody who runs a flooring company and doesn't have a whole lot of experience on the installation arm, it seems like the continuous struggles are always in the field. Mm. It's the sale is good, the guys get out on the job, and it kind of falls apart at that point. So as a project manager, I kind of I kind of took pride in trying to make sure that, we were on top of stuff out on the job. So that was kind of my cup of tea anyways. And so, stuff started going well. We swapped out a couple of installers. You really have to look for an installer's strong suit when you're appointing guys or looking for installers on a job. Not every job is for every installer. Not every customer is, for every installer. And it's important to understand those demographics, because you can be great, right up until the point the guys walk in the house. But if there's any friction there, or you just kind of know this lady is going to be a little bit more picky than your average lady, you might have one installer that you really are confident is going to take care of that lady, and you're going to have to convince her that she can't have her carpet on Friday, but she can have it on next Friday because that's when that guy's available.
Yeah.
But it's up to you. It's up to you to get that across and to make that customer happy, and that's what it takes. So again, improving on that was my job there. Spent several years there. The husband got a girlfriend, and the wife didn't like that, and so
Oh man.
They ended up splitting up, and the company ended up suffering. I stayed with them. They went through a couple years of downsizing as the wife tried to save it, and as we downsized, everybody that stayed that was able to stay at the company, you're taking on 2-3 jobs, just because, at some point the company was big, and then you downsize it. You still have a warehouse to manage. You still have the commercial to manage. You still have the sales to manage. So at that point, I also kind of got a crash course on residential, project management, just kind of by default, because they had to eliminate some overhead, and a residential project manager had to go. And at some point there was only a commercial project manager left, which was myself. And so I just kind of was nominated for that. And so, at that moment, drinking water out of a fire hose is the analogy.
Yeah, I get that.
And yeah. And so, we were able to hold it together for a couple of years, after they downsized quite a bit. And at that point it was just too difficult for her to hang on to it. And she called us all in on a Friday, and that was pretty much the end of, that company. And at that point, after doing something for 20 some years, I was kind of dreading walking back into a store who, I know my capabilities, but here I am vocally trying to sell myself, as a decent installer, and trying to get back in with a store after being out of the game, so to speak, for several years. And so I talked to a couple of people, and I called some of the installers in that, that I had worked with at the previous company, and I kind of told them, I think I'd like to see if, I could make a go at it, having a store and getting a couple of good installers, and, just starting small. And I had a couple of them that says, hey, we liked working with you here, and we like what you did for us, and we definitely work, for you if you had something for us. So, I started a company at that point, and we have an off-site warehouse and a small retail store in like a professional building that's got like 4 or 5 spaces in it. And then we have about a 2,000 square foot showroom. In flooring, you don't need to have everything that everybody carries, because there's so many similarities in LVP, for example, and how many different colors of beige carpet do you need? So you get yourself a couple of trustworthy, manufacturers that you can work with. I pick my manufacturers based on how quickly a rep responds to their email, believe it or not.
Can't blame you there.
Being a small store, you're not important to all of them, because they're kind of in protection mode, against their bigger stores, their larger accounts. And at some point, the communication is difficult, and it makes you look bad in front of a customer. when you can't get answers, that you might need from a rep or a manufacturer. It makes you look bad. So at that point, if you want to look good and you want to have good customer experience, and you want to make sure that the people that you're dealing with in business have the same business values as you do. And timely communication is it for me. At the end of the day, all emails are returned, and I expect all emails to be returned.
Yes. No, I couldn't agree more.
Yep.
Communication is 100% the key. Most times people are complaining about difficult customers. It's because there's a lack of communication, in my opinion. So totally understand that one. I would want to partner with people that can clearly communicate as well. Okay. So, man, that's a lot going on. So I got to ask, is your buddy still doing flooring, or did he drop out after a couple of years?
The guy that I joined with?
Uh-huh.
No, he still works for the union, and as a matter of fact, he lives 2 blocks away. He lives 2 blocks away from me. Where I live. I live.
Impressive.
So he still works for the union. The first shop that we worked for, when I left as a 3rd-year apprentice, they stayed working for that employer, and that employer kind of started falling apart, as far as wasn't paying the union benefits in on time, and
oh, man.
Eventually that guy closed.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they actually went down to the Rockford local because, I mentioned in the meeting, we live right on the state line.
Yeah.
So at that point, we were working in Madison every day, driving an hour. If you're driving to Middleton, hour and a half north. So they joined the Rockford local, which, they were working Rockford, south of Rockford, and he's still in the union, today. His dad is retired, and, he's kind of and he's a hard surface guy, because his dad was a sheet vinyl guy. And,
mm-hmm.
You find that when somebody's comfortable with their work, it becomes less of a job every day and just running through the motions. Your body knows what to do when you get on the job.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So where would one even begin? You had a learning curve because you had to go and learn residential project management, which is definitely different than commercial. So where would I begin as, let's say I'm just looking at getting the labor side of things because I don't have a store yet. I'm not going to be able to get stuff directly from some of the big name manufacturers, Shaw, Armstrong. They're not going to deal with me unless I have a brick and mortar store. So yeah. That's where a lot of commercial stuff I would think would come from in a lot of situations. How do I just get the labor? Where do I have to go to even begin to bid a job and get into these wide open 10,000 square foot spaces, or even, dental, like you said, a dental office before? Like, how do I find the dental office to put carpet squares in, or, the cheat goods in the procedural rooms and stuff?
So, the one avenue, of commercial is what I would consider more of a retail commercial project. And that is, go to start similar, end similar, to a retail, to a home project, except just on a different scale. So for example, your company, you just have your Google listing, and that's the best way, for people just to understand that you're out there. But if you're let's say your wife works for a dental office and the guy says, hey, I know your husband does flooring. Can you come in here and give me a quote on doing, I'd like that new LVP in the whole place,
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the guy walks in there, and the first thing that I would look at, is I would pull back and kind of see what I need for prep. Just because everything kind of starts with the subfloor. Now, once you've got all of that stuff ironed out, you're going to need a place to get the material. Now, there's other places to get the material, that aren't the large manufacturers, but you got to understand that there's there's not a lot of customer service in this end of the sale, because they're selling it to you and they want to walk away from it. So you can probably, you know, obtain the material at some of the supply houses, but there's some wholesalers out there that the guy should look for, and that would be where I would start on that. And at that point, you know, I mean, you obtain the material, you go in there, you do the floor prep correctly, you do everything, you base everything, and you get out of there, and it pays, you know, like a regular retail job. It should pay, you know, when the job's done. And because you have a large amount of material that you're buying up front, you know, I don't think it's unreasonable to definitely ask, you know, for enough money to cover the materials, you know, at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And part of that is because, you know, you just want to be able to manage that cash flow. You know, I mean, you got to be careful. You know, you might buy the material for this dentist office and not do it for 3 weeks until they're closed for a holiday. So you just want to be able to manage, you know, that cash flow. At that point, you finish it off like any other retail jobs. You know, you might buy them a bottle of floor cleaner. You know, I mean, we give floor cleaner away to the customers at the end of the job. You give them a little packet, you know, that tells them how they're supposed to clean their floor, because if you don't do some of those things, let's just say they don't clean the floor, you know, how they're supposed to clean the floor, they're calling you. You know, they're not calling a store, they're calling you. And at that point where I mentioned it's a difficult customer service train going down, you know, you are now reliant on, you're going to call the person that you bought the material from, which if it's a wholesaler or something online, that them coming out and doing the inspection to find out if there's something wrong with the material, that's going to be a tough road to handle, and the customer suffers in the meantime, and they continuously get more frustrated as the time goes on. Meanwhile, you're just at the mercy, you know, of whoever you bought the material from. Mm-hmm. So the other way of doing the same job is finding a local flooring store that the guy can buy the material from. So right now it seems like, you know, a lot of the installers want to try to circumvent the retail stores, you know, at any chance that they can. And some of the retail stores, I'm not going to tell you, you know, that they probably do their fair share of gouging. You know, I mean, as far as, you know, they see their pie in the industry shrinking. And then here's an installer that comes into them and they want to buy the material. And the first thing that goes through that guy's head is, well, I could have done that job, but here I'm trying to sell you. And so it goes right to they go right to a defensive mode. And so then their price goes up. Mm-hmm. I kind of look at it like I would much rather sell them the flooring at a reasonable margin to where we all kind of sort of are whole, because I just don't want you going into Home Depot and buying the stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'd rather make some money than no money.
Well, and I think I look at cash and carry. I consider a cash and carry sale what I had just, so, you know, if an installer comes into me and they want a pallet of LVT, I consider that a cash and carry sale. And from a retail store standpoint, I don't see much of a downside to a cash and carry sale. It's fairly easy, small amount of paperwork. But for the retail flooring stores that are kind of in self-preservation mode, they just assume see you walk out the door and not make the sale. And I just, you know, I don't go about my business the same way as everybody else has been running theirs for a while. It just doesn't seem very successful, seeing that the retail store is kind of, you know, their footprint is shrinking. So if we continue to do business how we've been doing it for the last 25 years, just going to continue to send the business somewhere else, I think.
Yeah.
So, you know, and the other part of a commercial, you know, project would be the bidding aspect of it from a developer or from a architecture firm aspect. Now that is definitely more labor intensive on the front end, slightly more labor intensive on the back end as far as paperwork goes. So the way the jobs usually start out is, you know, if you have a contractor that you work with, or you have an architecture firm that you work with, you know, they'll send you bid requests. And at that point, you know, you you kind of think, do I want to bid it? Do I not want to bid it? Because not everything that comes your way is really worthy of being bid in my world. And sometimes some general contractors are very, very difficult. They really beat you over the rails on the price, and so in those cases, I would just assume try to spend my time with the contractors who don't beat me up so much. So
Okay.
over the course of, the years, you kind of start learning, how that works. Because a general contractor, don't get me wrong, but, they're getting allotted probably $50,000 for a flooring allotment on a project. And if they can find somebody to do it for $35,000 or $40,000, they get to keep $10,000 just on that line alone.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding how that works, I don't have a problem with them keeping their $10,000. I just want to make sure the job is ready and there's nobody else there while my guys are there, because I want them to be as efficient as they can be. And that is where I think I'm not too, upset with them keeping $10,000 of what basically should have been flooring allotment. I just want to make sure the floors are swept and there's not 4 ceiling guys and 2 electricians in the same room as my guys. I mean, that is really kind of where, what else, So at that point, you would bid a project. I'm still kind of old. I'm still kind of old fashioned. So I have a blueprint printer. I print the pages that I need. There are takeoff programs, that allow you to do everything via computer. And I, when I'm scaling a drawing, it gives me an opportunity to do the square footage of the room, obviously the linear footage of the cove base at the same time. And it also I'm a visual person, and I think a lot of flooring guys are visual. So by literally going over the plan like that, it really gives you an idea how big the project is, how many rooms it is, what the doorway transitions are, some of those things that it's hard for me to, get all of that when I'm not writing it down on the page. And when you do it on a computer, it's a pretty sweet takeoff program, it's not, so those are the 2 ways to do a takeoff. Once you have a takeoff, basically you would have all your square footages, your linear footage for the project. And then you're going to email the product rep, for pricing. And part of the reason that you're going to email the product rep for pricing is because, like before, I had mentioned that these are architecture firm and developer jobs. So the way the price is kind of supposed to be set is everybody that requests a price for material on that job is supposed to be getting the same price. So if 5 stores call because it's this job, everybody's supposed to be getting the same price. There's really no true way of finding out if that's the case, but the reason everybody is supposed to receive the same price is because that material rep has been to that architecture firm and told them that if you use, you like our tile on that project, we'll do that project tile cost at this. Mm-hmm. And so that's how they're figuring out that it costs $26 million to build the whole building. So all of that happens before it ever kind of gets to us. But that's the reason that a lot of the stores are supposed to receive the same. Now, however much you decide to mark it up, now that is kind of where the make or break comes in. So if you're buying the tile at 3 and you're marking it up 40 or 50% and somebody else is only marking it up 20% and they're still buying it for 3, well, that's kind of where it gets, hairy in the commercial world, It's because, some people are out there, and as busy times go on, guys bid it a little bit less just to keep the guys busy, but not to try to veer too far off subject on that one. But so at that point, you'd call for pricing, put all your pricing together. And then at that point, you're going to market whatever your margin is. Now your margin, you got to kind of take into consideration what it costs to operate your business, because that is really where That's how you pay your lights. That's how you pay your lease. That's how you pay your forklift. So all of these things that it takes, to run, even an installation, a warehouse, you still could use a forklift and stuff like that. So even if you don't have a retail store, you're still going to have somewhat of an overhead, to be able to receive commercial goods into your warehouse and have a forklift there to unload the semi. So that would be a consideration in the margin. Then you put your thin sets, your glues, any primer. We always add a little bit extra for every commercial job because we moisture probe, the concrete.
Yeah.
So, if you're supposed to put a probe down every 1,000 or 2,000 feet, we throw some money in there, to make sure that we got our probes in the floor. And at that point, it's really, if you want to bid the job labor, it's up to you on the labor. So you've already bid the materials. You've already got that number set aside. Now you kind of look at the labor as far as, what's the labor worth? How quickly can we get through the job? And then and that number kind of fluctuates, depending on, if you're a union store, that labor is going to be a little bit more expensive. If you have a larger overhead, store, then typically, it's funny because every time I think of somebody that has a large overhead, their price always seems to be lower than some of the people that have a small overhead. So I'm not always correct on saying usually people that have large overhead, their bids usually are a little bit more, just because with the mentality that they have to pay for everything. I don't, but that's not always the case. Just finishing up, on that, you would basically put a labor number in there, put your number together, submit your bid to whether it was a contractor that asked you or whether it was you were submitting your bid, directly to the architect, which a lot of times is not possible. Usually it's a general contractor that you're submitting your bid to. At that point you get the job. They send you a purchase order and you order the material. This is kind of where a credit line, kind of comes into play a little bit. You order the material and it's $10,000 worth of material and you got a, $10,000 line of credit with that vendor, then you're good. But if you've only got $5,000 line of credit, you got to shell a little bit out of your pocket to get it. And you do the job and you get paid. And it sometimes, depending on the contractors, it could take, we've had it take as long as 3 months, to recoup the money. And what I like to do anymore is you get your material, you get your progress draw basically in the mail the day after the purchase order comes in. Because if you wait until, they send the purchase order and then you get the job and then you order the materials, sometimes, like, for example, you have to have your paperwork in by the 20th to get the draw check cut the 20th of the following month. So you're just better off to put in a materials draw, like literally the day after you get their purchase order, knowing that you're going to order the material this week, and just, it seems like the lengthiest process in a commercial work is the payment part. So getting ahead of that and trying to just understand that it takes time. Some people get super frustrated, that it takes so long, to get it paid. And then they look back on it and they're like, oh, if I just got my paperwork in a little bit quicker, we would have got our check a little bit quicker. So really just starting there is beneficial.
Well, and it seems so most commercial work, to my understanding, and having, when I was doing, I did reality television before I got into flooring, and I was a independent guy, and a lot of companies were net 30. So it seems like that's how a lot of commercial work is. If not, I'm sure some of the bigger firms with a lot more power are probably net 90. Like you said, you had to wait 90 days sometimes.
Well, even if they're a net 30, they'll have you turn in the bill on the 20th, for example, and they're not cutting the check until the 20th of the next month. But then they might not mail it to you for a day or two, so you're right out there at 45 sometimes, maybe a 50, even on a net 30.
Yeah.
So it would be different if it was from the day you turn the bill in, it was a net 30. But if the bills are due on the 20th, it doesn't matter if you turn your bill in on the 10th. The net 30 part don't start till the 20th, and then it's the 20th the following month. So they figured out a way to kick it out a little longer.
Well, of course they're going to earn interest on all that big money they got. Don't worry about the little guy. So I do. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Kyle. You're good.
I was going to say I want to come back and touch on this. I had another question, but go ahead and finish up.
Just with the installation only part on the commercial. So if you work if you're working for a store and you're doing installation work only, commercial, residential, whatever. I mean, every store owner runs their stuff different, but I mean that kind of stuff should pay every week or every other week. I don't think that it's fair to the guys, to make them, if they're doing just installation only work, I don't think that it's fair to them to have to wait like a 30 days, until the store got paid, because, that's, I don't know. I wouldn't think that. I think it would be very difficult to continue to grow a crew or grow a group of guys or keep the guys in good speed. The last thing I ever want my guys to think about when they're on a job is money. I don't want that to even cross their mind. I want them to enjoy their day. I want them to be focused. I want the best that they can give me. And if they're worried about money, I ain't getting it.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff, is really where I'm at, on that. So if you're labor only guy, you should be getting paid, somewhat regularly.
No, I totally agree. If you're working through a store, then you need to be on some kind of weekly, bi-weekly schedule. It's their duty to make sure they have the cash flow to provide in a situation like that when they're waiting on funds. If you are a person that is running your own show and it's direct to you, then you need to find a way to support yourself. You've got to have the cash flow. So, what kind of, I want to ask this question, but I have another one too. So, and they're both different topics. What kind of cash flow would I need if, as an installer running my own show, to go out and start doing commercial work? And then if I didn't want to use lines of credit and things like that, I'm going to put everything out there on my own. And then, you said that, you could meet architects and stuff like that, or, maybe, the owner of a shop and you're going to get the job that way. But I've heard that there's like email lists you can get on to find bids, or is it a matter of just going out, pounding the pavement, finding these places being built and introducing yourself to a bunch of GCs and finding work that way? So I can ask it again if we want to. Let's start with like the cash flow thing, and then we'll go from there.
So, if you're looking to do, labor only, commercial, that. So it's kind of the same question. So if you're doing labor only work, part of my question goes back to my last answer as far as if you're working for a mom and pop shop or even a big shop and you're doing labor only work, that should still pay, every week or 2 weeks. So if you're a guy and you're running a crew and you've got, 2-3 other guys working for you, 4 or 5 guys or whatever, you got to kind of think, what if, just a ballpark fair average, for a guy every week is going to be, and every place is different, and so I don't want this answer to be divisive by any means, but $1,000 to $1,500 a week, I think, for a, 8-hour day, with, and you're part of a crew, I think $1,000 or $1,500 a week is fair for my area, so to speak.
Yeah.
So in saying that, if you've got a 5-guy crew and you figure, well, I'm going to be on this commercial job, but I'm not going to get paid, for a couple of weeks. Well, you're going to need, probably $15,000 potentially, in the next 2 weeks to pay for yourself and those 5 guys, just in anticipation that the way the paydays for your guys land and the paydays for the store that you work for land don't always align, and you need some cash flow. So in saying that, I think that answer it has to be kind of based on how many guys are on the crew and whatnot. But I mean, I'd think $15,000 to $20,000, of just a revolving cash flow or some nature, is fair, as
mm-hmm.
long as you're working for a store that you're getting paid, bi-weekly.
Okay.
Well,
yeah. And I'm not saying going through a store. Like literally I go and I find all my own work. I don't do anything through a store. So,
okay.
In that aspect, like I'm going to go directly to the GC and it's just me, or I have the crew. But I think what it comes down to is it sounds like you probably want, I don't know, roughly like 2 months worth of salary. So if you're running 5 guys and you're paying them all $1,000 to $1,500 a week, multiply that times 2 months worth of salaries, and that's probably a safe place to be.
Yep. And if you're going to run your own commercial, outfit, not through any other store, then you'd probably have to add, to that 2 months of salary, only for the simple fact that, you're going to have to pay for some sort of a warehouse building kind of sort. It's hard to operate a commercial, company out of anything other. I mean, you have to have somewhere where a semi can deliver. And
mm-hmm.
obviously no semi driver is going to unload a pallet by himself, by hand. And you don't, as a company, you don't want to have to pay a warehouse guy to sit there all day to unload a semi. So the only way to do those things is to have a forklift there with a semi driver that will just hop on the forklift and unload himself. So some of that overhead would have to be added to that 2 months of salary.
Okay.
And then obviously if you're going to, you're going to have to buy materials, for those guys to install in those 2 months, which is going to add also, to that 2 months of salary and warehouse overhead. So I could say that, you should probably bump it up to about 50.
Okay.
Probably about 50,000, is I think is reasonable. The bigger the company gets, you'll find yourself burning through more cash than you ever remember before, because that's kind of how it goes. If you're a frugal person and you start a business, it is absolutely amazing the amount of money, that comes and goes, throughout the year. And that's, it's all in good business. But yeah, 50,000 would probably get you to start out, get you, small building and enough to pay the guys and to go in between. And like I said, you as a business owner don't want to be thinking about being strapped for cash either, because then you become counterproductive, because you're kind of worrying about trying to now collect money to make sure that you're paying your guys on time at the end of the month, instead of maybe sitting in the office and bidding 2 or 3 more commercial jobs. You find yourself as a bill collector.
Yeah.
So having that capital part, ironed out, it frees you up, to bid more work to keep those guys busy,
I think that's key. Money management is huge. Anyone listening, go back, listen to the bookkeeping episode, and that'll help you get your money in order so you can find a way to get the 50K so you can start doing commercial jobs. No, I think that's all. It's so important to be able to maintain cash flow and keep it organized. And, you don't, like you said, you don't want to have to worry about, how am I going to come up with the money to pay these guys? How am I going to get the next job? Like, if you can just focus on having to find the work, you're in a much, much better position. So,
or even just customer service. Think about the opportunities that you can offer for better customer service, when you're not trying to collect money, it's just there. If you run a business and it's, just seems miserable all the time, I just can't understand there's no benefit to that, and that the customer sees that too sometimes, so you just have to make sure that, you're not putting yourself in that situation.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's go back and, where am I meeting these people? Like, I add for like my residential remodel stuff. I'm big on advertising in Facebook community groups. So I don't know that that's going to find me a lot of commercial work because there's not commercial guys in there asking. So am I pounding the pavement as these places are being built and introducing myself to GCs? Is there like a generic email list that I can apply to be on somewhere where these things are being sent out? Like, hey, come bid on this new project. Like, where am I going to make the connections needed?
Yeah, it is. It's one of those things that it's the 20 years in the industry, in my experience, is kind of where I've met some of those people. And yeah, it is really a relationship. It is really a relationship industry, as far as one end of the commercial, the other end is just straight up productivity, all cost driven. So there's, two different aspects, of that, in there. So what I'd like, there are bidding platforms via a Dodge Analytics, I believe, is one, and then there are Construct Connect, I believe, or formerly iSquarefoot, I don't know, whichever name they're running out of this year. So that is the two, kind of bidding platforms. Now, those cost you. So I mean, you could be anywhere from $4,000 to $5,000, $6,000 a year just for them to send you bid invites, which is no guarantee that you're going to get the job. So it's a very, it has to pay for itself like anything in business. If you can't see it ever, repaying itself $6,000, or it's going to take you all year to recoup that, which on a commercial level, a couple of decent jobs you could probably get that.
Yeah.
But that's one avenue of it. The other avenue of it is walking into the contractor's office. The guy on the job, in the job trailer, so some people might take this to offense, but some of the reason that there's not any of the older generation carpenters in the job trailer anymore, it's all young people, is because they're all yes people. The young guys in the job trailer, they've been to school for construction management, but they've never really swung a hammer. So the idea that you walk into the job trailer and try to sell them on that guy, he don't have a say in nothing.
Okay.
So you got to go to the office, and you got to talk to somebody in the office, because that's where all the bidding happens. By the time the job site trailer is out there, I'd have to say 90% of the subcontractors have all been already let, which means, there's really no opportunity, to go in there, and give them a price. So, going to the offices, and what it'll do is some of the people at the offices, they're comfortable working with the people that they've been working with, and they're not going to give you a fair shake. And you can't take that as bad thing. Honestly, take it as good that they're not going to waste your time. So if they don't want to give you an opportunity, well, they're doing you a favor by not stringing you along, in my opinion. So understanding if you have the opportunity right off the bat seems to be a time savings. So, that is definitely one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is once you get in with a general contracting firm, let's just say, you get in with them, they're going to sometimes ask you to bid jobs where there's an architecture firm that has already selected all the flooring. And that is kind of where not having a brick and mortar store, that's where it runs into a wall a little bit. Because let's just say, for example, Armstrong is selected or Shaw is selected on those plans. What you have is a general contractor that asks you to bid a project, but you can't get the material, because you don't have a store. And so obviously, problem number one. And so now you got to figure out, in order to return the bid, you got to figure out how to get the material. And so here is where, when installers try to cut out the retail store, at every step, here's where it's beneficial for an installer that wants to kind of do some commercial work in a labor-only fashion. Or just on their own. In this particular case, they could supply the material for the job. They walk into our store, and if it's something something we're not bidding, and we don't ask, but if somebody walked into our store, a guy, and he says, hey, I'd like, price on this much Armstrong product, we would buy it and then sell it to him. And then he could basically then at that point provide the material and the labor, to his contractor, or to his general contractor, and complete the job.
Yeah.
So that is the tricky part on that. Now, that general contractor in 6 months might ask you to bid a job, and you get the plan, and the only thing that's specified because so when they, in order to finish a plan to get like final approval, a lot of times they don't have to list exactly what floor they want. They just have to list the floor finish. So like it'll say bathrooms, LVT,
okay,
offices, carpet. And so in that particular case, what you have is a contractor that has sent you a bid request with a plan that has what they want in what area, but it doesn't tell you exactly what they want in what area. Now, this is what I call, basically a self-spec. So basically what you do is you have to be careful here. So you would call one of your better reps. So like I would say, we have, some Armstrong, so you would call your rep, you would register this project with your rep, and you would tell them, I need 3,000 feet of this, and this is the project address. Now, when you return your bid, you are going to put in your bid what flooring you spec'd for those areas, as far as they didn't tell you what they wanted for LVT. So now in the bid, you're telling them what they're getting because they never, now you're telling them what series they're getting. And then if you get the job, you would give them an architecture binder, and then the customer could pick from all 15 colors in that particular series. So what you're doing is more pinpointing the series of the floor that you're pricing for the job.
Yeah.
Now, if you returned your bid and maybe 3 other people returned their bids and they like your number a little bit better, than they like the other guy's, number, sometimes what they'll do is they'll call the other contractors that bid, and they will ask them to redo their bid based on your material selections. So at this point, a person would think that, that's kind of, not fair, but that's the way that it works. So now here is where, if you got a good rep or not. When you registered that product for that project, that rep is supposed to give you what I call price protection, which basically they register that product in their CSM system to that project. Now, when these other people call and they say, hey, we'd like a price on this Armstrong flooring, your price is lower than their price because you brought Armstrong's product self-spec'd to a project.
Interesting.
And they are rewarding you for... Basically, they're rewarding you for the A&D work that they didn't do. Mm-hmm. So, for example, you basically brought their product to that project, and, that's their product never would have made it to that project if it wasn't for you.
Yeah.
So that's one way for them to reward you. Now, having a good rep relationship is important because self-spec is a very dirty part of the business as far as if you don't have full trust, in your rep, you might be better off just to call the rep and ask for just general pricing on 3,000 feet of material, not tell them, what project, it's for.
Mm-hmm.
For the example that, you never really know if they're going to, you never really know if they have a better relationship with a different store that's also bidding the job.
Yeah.
So that, kind of goes back to, the first, part of the podcast was, those, you have to understand that, the store is your livelihood or the business is your livelihood, and that rep, you want them to understand that. So, yeah.
No, it's been said many times. Sadly, it's who you know, not what you know. So relationships are going to be key no matter what. You can provide a a good install that's, you know, proficient, meets standards, but if you're good at building relationships with people, that's going to go a long, long way, as opposed to not being good at the relationship part and providing like excellent quality all the time. So,
well, and there's enough to be said about, you know, it does feel awkward sometimes to be on the outside of the good old boys club. You know, you see the good old boys club and you see everybody in there and they're laughing and they're all passing work around and you're just not in that group, you know, at the moment. You know, it's a tough feeling, you know, but I think at some point, you know, we all just, you know, eventually you're going to be part of your own good old boys club. It took those guys 20 years of working together to be like that. And I think if we were in that group, we would be appreciative of how comfortable it is to work with the same 10 people. So yeah. I think it's everybody's goal, but don't let it discourage you that you're not part of somebody else's good old boys club.
It takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. You know, that's the thing. So I'm with you. You know, you can go back and you could listen to, very early, the episode with Billy Graham, and he talks about how he went to a builder and got a job and then didn't hear from him, and because the builder had a guy, the guy was just busy, so he gave him another install, and years went by, and he went into the office, and lo and behold, he had just gotten, the guy retired, or, you know, he'd moved on from that guy, and now he's the installer he uses. So I know you were saying, like, go into the office, meet the guys, and maybe they're not super receptive. That's not to say that you shouldn't go in there and, you know, every couple of weeks and try and build that relationship. Persistence is going to go a really long way in anything that you're doing.
Well, and people change names and change positions. So, like, I mean, you walk in there 1 month and there might be, you know, same people. You walk in there 2 months later and somebody moved up or left and went somewhere else. And, you know, there's your opportunity, you know, to introduce yourself, because maybe one of the good old boys left, you know.
Totally.
So, definitely.
All right. So kind of back on the money side of things, we talked about it being net 30, you know, maybe longer than that. I know some companies could probably ding you for net 90. But if I recall correctly, commercial work generally holds 10% for a year because they're going to make sure that there's no, like, warranty failures, things like that.
So we don't experience, I shouldn't take that back. We only experience that with one of the contractors that we work with.
Okay.
A $2 million umbrella policy will help that, you know, I mean, so obviously, you know, you're going to have your general liability, you know, type $1 million policy, you know, that you're going to need, you know, to do pretty much any work, you know, residential work, any of that nature. And then commercial work, you know, you need to bump that. It's a totally separate policy. So you still need the $1 million, you know, policy, you know, but now you've got a $2 million umbrella policy. And sometimes that policy, you know, makes those contractors comfortable enough, you know, to where they don't have to hold that retainage. Some contractors want to hold that retainage. In my opinion, it seems to be the contractors who are always price shopping are the ones who hold the retainage, just in my experience. And part of that is because some of the contractors that price shop a lot, they try to get into the field of buying the material direct. And then they'll hire a labor only, you know, bunch of guys to do it, which is not a bad thing. But sometimes if they have a problem with that job, it's hard to go after tangible assets for a labor only company. And so part of the reason that they hold that 10% is because there's really, you know, the way a labor only company operates, you know, there's not a lot of assets to go after if the job got wild and failed, so to speak, which does happen. Yes. You know, I mean, but that's kind of where having your moisture tests and everything else done and all that documented, you know, I mean, it's easy to prove that that stuff was correct at the point of install. And meanwhile, they can argue amongst themselves. You've got you took the time to document and everything. I mean, you're safe. So, I mean, doing those tests on commercial jobs, it's the only thing that's going to save your ass if something happens.
No, couldn't agree more. I mean, it's
Yeah.
spec'd in the instructions for a reason to do it. So
Yeah.
just do
But yes,
it.
they do hold the 10. They do hold the 10. They pay it at the end of the year because they got to get it off their books. I mean, because it was money that, I mean, by rights, it was money that was, made in like 2019. So they have to, they're going to 1099 you, at the end of the year. So obviously they want that check to be out, and part of that year's, cost. So yes, that is part of the reason that they hold it, for a year. A lot of times it's just kind of calendar year, but I suppose it could be a 12-month period.
Okay.
Also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I would think like once you kind of got my take on it is if you could build up a solid system, then you're going to have that, $50K laying around that you're supporting yourself off of, and you get a couple months into it, you have income rolling in. That 10% really should be all profit by the time you're said and done, or at least that's the way I would look at it if I was running that business. That retainer that they're holding, I would consider like residual income, as if I was like a music artist or a book writer or something like that, in that once those retainers started rolling in, that should just be play money for me, essentially, that I can either take and use all for me as the owner of the business, or I could take that and invest it straight back into the company to help it grow.
Buy a piece of equipment.
Correct. So
Yep.
that's the way I would look at that. I wouldn't look at it as a bad thing that they hold 10%. It's if you set your numbers up correctly, there's no reason you should be depending upon that 10% to get you by when it comes in. That shouldn't be to pay the guys their salary or to be getting the materials for the next job. That's all money that should have already have come out from the draws previously and stuff like that. But that's my take on it.
Yep. Nope. That'd be a correct statement. As long as nothing happened during the job and you had to have that 10%, if something happened, went sideways, something you didn't account for, something that you weren't able to, convince them that a change order, is in line for something. And at that point, and that's part of the reason that you don't bid that low, is because if you're bidding in that 10%, I mean, there's no room for error, and that's part of it. So, yeah, it's a correct statement to say that, it's kind of, it's extra money. It's something you can fix the trucks with at the end of the year, putting tires on them, stuff like that. It's, you want to reinvest, in order to grow a business, you gotta, it's like a house, nobody buys a house and then doesn't do anything, for 20, 25 years, you're always improving it a little bit, and I think that's the thing about a business. I think the other thing is as a business owner, if you go into business because you want to make a lot of money, then I'm not going to tell you that it's not possible. I'm just going to tell you you're not going to be able to grow your business and do it. It's kind of in my opinion, it's kind of it's one or the other. If you go into business and you pay yourself a reasonable, wage, which is like in some, it's less than what you might make, working for somebody else. But like looking at the bigger picture, maybe in 5 or 6 years, you'll be able to pay yourself more than that. But in the meantime, in order to compete and in order to show these contractors that you're serious, you got to show up with equipment that's meant for the job. You got to show up with guys that are on the same page. You got to be ready, and investing in your business and being able to, take care of some of those needs. And I guess prep is really kind of where I go with that, because prep is always one of those things that you never seem to see it until the last minute. And it always holds the job up. But if you've got everything you need to take care of it, that guy's going to sign the change order. All your stuff is there. He's going to walk in there and he's going to say, man, that's some pretty nice equipment. No wonder I'm paying $5,000. But if you walk in there, with a bucket full of tools, some scrapers and stuff, and I'm not saying that, there's not a, good for that too, but it's important for them to see you grow, because I believe that any contractor that is serious, about, doing good business with people, they want your company to grow with theirs.
Yes.
And kind of, I think, where, that good relationship comes into play. But yes, reinvesting in the company, I think is the only way to grow it. I don't think that you can grow in a way of harvesting enough customers in that way. I think reinvesting in the business, people see that. I think that's where the growth is at.
Yeah, no, totally agree. You want to be able to grow with the people you're working with, and you're all adding to the pie. So, there's give and take, there's ebb and flow, however you want to put it, but we're all in it together. You can't just worry about yourself. Otherwise, you're not going to make the connections you need and get that good old boys club. So,
yeah,
totally agree. I got to say thank you so much for your insights. I think it's really informative. There's guys and gals that are always interested in finding new ways to grow their businesses, and I think they have a good blueprint now of how they can kind of go about it if they're interested in getting into commercial. So I definitely appreciate your time and your insights. If somebody was interested in getting a hold of you and had some more questions, do you mind giving out some kind of contact information? Is there places that we can see your business or your work? Anything you want to kind of plug really quick?
They're more than welcome, to call me. That I'm kind of a low key guy, so anything you guys need, just let me know. Try my best.
Okay.
Do you want my phone number?
If you're happy to give it out, it'll be on the internet forever now.
Oh no, Nick. Let's see here. It's fine. So it's in 608-290-4397, and my name's Shawn.
Awesome. And then what's your store?
So the name of my store is Flooring Inspirations. We happen to be out of Janesville, Wisconsin, and our website is flooring-inspirations.com. One thing I can say from a good website, and it helps your business. And the other thing that helps your business is just making sure that you post on your Google listing, and stuff like that. Most people, don't understand that, just having a website is fine, but posting on your Google listing and stuff like that, it does help. So part of running a business, is, if you're going to run a business, it seems like there's more work off the floor than on the floor.
Yeah.
So
totally.
Don't neglect the website.
Nope. Couldn't agree more. Awesome. If you are in that Janesville area, Shawn will get you product at a decent price if you want to go commercial, but not if you're bidding against him.
Well,
yeah, come on. He might make a little bit more money on that.
Gotta draw the line somewhere,
No, awesome. So once again, thank you. If you guys have questions or gals, reach out to him. He put it out there, so take advantage of everybody on these shows that is willing to help you grow. You are the sum of the 5 people you hang out with most, and if you want to get out of the position you're in, find those more successful people that you would like to be like, and you will start getting to their level. So once again, Shawn, thank you very much. I appreciate your time and your valuable insights, and I look forward to talking with you in the future.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. That's all the time we have for this week. To keep the conversation going, head on over to the Floor Academy Facebook group. Be sure to subscribe so you can hear each and every episode. We can be found on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and most major podcast directories. Don't forget to leave a review and let us know what you think about the show. If you would like to be a guest, have questions or feedback, you can email us at flooracademypodcast@gmail.com. You can help support the show by becoming a patron over at www.patreon.com/flooracademy. Remember to learn while you earn.